In this video, I'll be talking about different forms and different directions of natural selection. Often we just talk about natural selection as if it's a uniform thing, but it can take on, once we start considering different traits, especially different quantitative traits, it can start to take on lots of interesting variations. So as stated in previous videos, phenotypic traits, they can be discrete or quantitative. By discrete, that's things like eye color or whether you have sickle cell or anemia or not. Those can often be determined by fairly simple Mendelian genetics, alleles at a single locus. Quantitative traits, they're measured numerically: height, weight, blood pressure, length of a beak on a finch. Those are quantitative traits, and they're typically determined by many genes. In order to study quantitative traits, what we often do is we plot fitness or a fitness component, like number of offspring or size of offspring, but we plot the quantitative trait against the fitness component. So in this case here, we have on the x-axis, we're going to plot our trait, and on the y-axis, we're going to plot our fitness component. In this particular example, we're going to have the mass of the mother. So for many organisms, the size of the mother indicates how many resources she has stored. So this could be the height of a tree or the mass of a herbaceous plant, the mass of a mammal. Those things all often indicate the storage of lots of resources. That's a heritable quantitative trait. Often being large, having the ability to store large amounts of fat or to be a robust, strong organism, that's heritable. A fitness component could be the mass of the child. Producing a big, healthy baby helps the baby survive into the future. So we have our fitness component that we can measure on mom to determine her fitness, and then we can measure a trait. And in this case, there's generally a positive correlation. The bigger the mom, the bigger the baby. So a positive correlation, an upward slope between a trait and a fitness indicates that selection can increase the population mean of that trait. So in this case, we have a positive correlation here. So we would indicate that selection would act to increase, selection would increase the mean size of the mom in the population, because bigger moms produce bigger babies, and bigger babies are more likely to survive and pass their genes on. So the moms down here, small moms on the lower end of the x-axis down here at 2.5, they are going to produce small babies. Small babies aren't going to survive well and pass on their genes. So those genes are going to disappear from the population. Large moms are going to produce large babies, so those large baby genes and large mama genes are going to move into the future, and that's going to result in more individuals being large. That's going to move the average size of moms up as generations pass. So again, a positive correlation between a trait and fitness that indicates that natural selection can increase the mean of the trait, the population of the mean. Again, any given individual doesn't evolve over time, populations evolve. So we'll often show this by showing a histogram. On the x-axis here is the mean of the trait. The frequency of the trait in the individuals in the population is shown here. So here, there's being a small mom at unit 1 here, those are relatively rare. Large moms, 12, 13, 14 are relatively rare. Most moms in the population are around 7. So fitness is not actually on this graph. Fitness is going to be represented separately by showing a line, by showing the positive correlation. As moms get bigger, their fitness goes up. Now we can overlay these graphs. You'll often see this in books where we've got what's called a dual y-axis. Over here, we're showing the frequency of moms at different height. So this left y-axis relates to the histogram, and then the right y-axis relates to fitness. So this indicates that individuals down here on this end, they are rare, but when they do occur, they are going to have low fitness. Individuals here are also rare, but they have the highest fitness. So these few individuals that are very big, they have the highest fitness. Most individuals are average size, and they have average fitness. Now, when you think about how these graphs relate to here, these individuals that are small, these one or two individuals that are small, individuals here are small, they have relatively low fitness, so they are not going to pass their genes for small size on into the future. These individuals here are not very common currently, but they are going to be most likely to survive and pass their genes on. They're going to increase the frequency of the genes that cause being big into the future. So again, individuals on this end are going to have relatively low fitness. Individuals on the high end are going to have higher fitness, and the population is going to have an increasing frequency of the genes for large size. So what we see here is that over time, this histogram can shift. So originally, the mean was a little bit less than 7. Mean was 6.8. If there's a positive correlation between this trait and fitness, larger individuals are more likely to survive and produce. They're going to pass their genes for being big into the future. This is going to drive up the mean, and here the distribution has shifted and it's 7.5. These individuals and their genes didn't move into the future. These individuals and their genes did move into the future. So this is called directional selection because it's moving. Evolution, natural selection has a directionality to it, which is larger size, and there's a consistent push, a consistent direction of moving towards a larger size. Now, directional selection can be either positive or it can be negative, so we can talk about positive selection or negative selection, positive directional selection, or negative directional selection. Here's another representation of this in terms of negative selection. Here we've got some sort of trait. It's not defined in this figure from this book, but here individuals on the highest on the x-axis here have the lowest fitness, whereas the individuals on the left hand here have the highest fitness. So there's a negative correlation. So this is going to drive the distribution to be smaller. The green here is the original distribution, and selection is going to move the shift, the peak, this direction after selection. In this case, in a previous example, I used histograms to show to show the distribution of the trait. Here, we're just using a smooth curve. Those are just simple, small difference in a way of presenting the data. So again, negative correlation. Here is the original distribution of the trait. After selection, the mean moves down, moves to the left. So selection on a quantitative trait can be directional, as we just shown, but it can also take on a characteristic that's called stabilizing, or there can also be disruptive selection. So the way I'll lay out these graphs for these different examples, I'll first show the distribution of the trait. That's our starting point. Then I'll show the correlation between the trait and fitness, and then I'll show what happens afterwards. So again, here for positive directional selection, we have our distribution of our trait. We have a positive correlation between that trait and fitness. So natural selection is going to move up the mean, the population mean in the next generation. It's going to move it up slightly because these individuals here had the highest fitness and their genes are passed more frequently into the future. So stabilizing selection, we start off with our same distribution of traits. We have a curve here. This shouldn't be confused with the shape here. This is showing the relationship between fitness and the trait. So when the trait is on the left hand here, let's call it size because it's easy. So say when an organism is small, it has low fitness. As it increases in size, it has high fitness, but then as it decreases, it's low fitness again. This is actually matches with with infant body size and fitness. Size of children is relatively heritable, size at birth, and because of limitations on the size of the human birth canal, even though large babies are good because they're more robust, they have more resources. If they're too big, they get stuck in the birth canal, and small babies are bad because they are not robust, they lack resources for survival. So in humans, the highest fitness is on intermediate sized babies. That's why we don't see 15-pound babies, why we don't typically see 6-pound babies, except in extreme circumstances. Most babies, 6, 7, 8 pounds, somewhere in there. So what this does is this eliminates the extremes from the population. Women who give birth to medium-sized babies are most likely to produce the most babies. Those babies are going to go on to produce medium-sized babies of their own, and the distribution is going to become pointier. So the extremes on either end have been removed. You can ask what this is going to do to the standard deviation of the distribution of baby weight. And what it's going to do is it's going to shrink the amount of variation in the population. So human birth weight is actually pretty consistent, pretty constant. Full-term healthy birth weight has a pretty restricted range. So disruptive selection has the opposite. So again, we have opposite pattern as stabilizing selection. So we have our trait distribution here. It's been the same. Here, the curve has been flipped. The highest fitness value is on a low trait. The lowest fitness value is here, and the highest. This should say high. Highest value is over here. So it goes high, low, high. This value is wrong here. So what this does is this eliminates the middle. These individuals in the middle here, we're starting off with them being abundant, but they are going to have the lowest fitness. And it's the individuals at the extremes that are going to have the highest. So this is going to shrink the middle here, and it's going to make either end more common. And this is going to impact the standard deviation, the amount of variability. This is actually going to increase the amount of variability in the population. Here's another representation of it. One thing it can do is it can produce a bimodal distribution. So here is fitness relative to the trait, high fitness, low fitness, high fitness. The green represents the original distribution of the trait in the population. Then after natural selection, those in the middle had the lowest fitness. So we create a little dip in here, and it can result in a bimodal distribution. So directional selection, for review, is that selection acting against one extreme, either, for example, really small or really big, and it either increases or decreases the mean. Stabilizing selection is selection against both extremes. So the mean stays about the same, but the variation decreases. Human birth weight is an example of this. Imagine birth weight for most mammals is going to be this. Going to be under stabilizing selection. Disruptive selection is the opposite of stabilizing selection. It's selection against the middle. It increases variation, and it can even create a bimodal distribution. One thing with bimodal distributions is that the mean can actually stay the same, but the standard deviation increases. There's also other forms of selection that we talk about. One of these is frequency-dependent selection. This is an interesting form of selection. We'll have an example in a second. Another one is balancing selection. Frequency-dependent selection is selection against the most common form of a trait. And it often happens when there are interactions between species. And the classic example that tends to be in all the textbook is of a fish in a lake that has a parasite. And this parasite, comes in two forms, two morphs. The jaws can either be right-oriented or left-oriented. And these parasitic fish have evolved in order to come up and bite scales off and flesh off of one side or the other. So the right-jawed fish is good at chewing off scales from the left side of a prey fish. And the left-jawed fish is good at chewing scales off the right side of a fish. If you're this fish, you're going to be less able to get it off of the other side of the fish. So over time, these fish, the prey fish, learn to protect themselves and avoid one side or the other. So when right-jawed fish, when these fish become really common, the prey fish become really good at shaking them off, spotting them and shaking them off. In that case, it becomes really advantageous to be a left-jawed fish because your prey fish are all looking to the other side. They're looking at the opposite side for a parasite coming from that direction. So these left-jawed fish can come in, can sneak in. However, these left-jawed fish are going to have higher fitness when this happens. They're going to produce more offspring. The population is going to become dominated by left-jawed fish. And then the prey fish are going to learn to watch their right flank and to protect their right side. And so these left-jawed fish are going to be at a disadvantage. And the right-jawed fish, who have become rare, they are going to be able to better sneak up on the fish. And so it's going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's whatever the rarest form of the jaw is going to have the advantage, but then it's going to go back and forth as the prey fish learn. Frequency dependent selection is always going to maintain variation because one genotype is never favored permanently. It's never good to just be one. It's always going to be, as soon as one phenotype becomes common, its fitness is actually going to reduce, be lower, and it's going to be advantageous to be the other phenotype. Balancing selection is somewhat similar to stabilizing selection, but stabilizing selection applies to quantitative traits. It applies to traits that we measure with a ruler or weigh on a scale, things like weight, mass, height, birth weight, size. Balancing selection refers to qualitative traits or discrete traits, like having a sickle cell anemia or not, and it's when the heterozygotes have the highest fitness. So because of this, the heterozygotes possess both the dominant allele and the recessive allele, so they are going to produce both homozygous recessive, homozygous dominant, and heterozygous children. So all of the alleles, both alleles, are going to be maintained in the population. So while it's great to be, if you're living in a place with malaria, it's great to be a heterozygous, to be big S, little s. You're going to pass those genes on to your children, though. You're going to be successful. However, some of your children are going to be big S, and susceptible to malaria. Some of your children are going to be little s, and have sickle cell anemia, and only a portion of your children are going to be heterozygotes.